He took his daughter to the emergency room and found his ex giving birth to his new son. Hello, let's hear another incredible story. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. I love narrating stories for you, so get ready. Let's start. The fluorescent lights of Denver General Hospital buzzed overhead like angry wasps as Marcus Green sprinted through the corridors. His 7-year-old daughter, Jada, clutched against his chest. One flip-flop slapped against the polished linoleum, while his bare left foot made squeaking sounds that would have been comical under different circumstances. "Daddy, you're running weird," Jada whispered against his neck, her small arms wrapped tightly around him. Blood from her scraped knee had soaked through the makeshift bandage he'd created from his Star Wars t-shirt, and guilt gnawed at his stomach like a persistent ache. "I know, sweetheart. Just hold on." Marcus's breath came in short bursts. He'd been in the middle of debugging a particularly stubborn piece of code when Mrs. Patterson from next door had called, her voice tight with concern. "Jada fell at the playground. There's quite a bit of blood." Now, racing through the hospital's maze-like corridors, Marcus felt that familiar knot of panic that always accompanied moments when he had to be the responsible adult, the single parent, the only one Jada could count on. A sign caught his peripheral vision. "Emergency department," with an arrow pointing left. He veered sharply, his remaining flip-flop skidding on the smooth floor. But something felt off. The hallway seemed too quiet, too softly lit. Instead of the controlled chaos he expected from an ER, he found himself surrounded by pastel-colored walls and the gentle hum of monitors. "Excuse me, sir." A nurse appeared beside him, her expression a mixture of professional concern and barely contained amusement. "Are you looking for the emergency room?" Marcus stopped, suddenly aware of how he must look. Disheveled hair sticking up in 12 directions, mismatched shoes, and a blood-stained shirt that proclaimed, "May the Force be with you," in faded letters. "Yes, my daughter. She's hurt her knee pretty badly." "You're in the maternity ward, honey," the nurse said gently, pointing down the corridor. "Emergency is 2 floors down. But before you go anywhere, let me take a quick look at that knee." As she knelt beside them, carefully examining Jada's wound, Marcus let his gaze wander down the hallway. That's when he heard it, a sound that made his blood freeze in his veins. A low moan, distinctly feminine, distinctly familiar, coming from one of the nearby rooms. "Daddy!" Jada's voice seemed to come from very far away. "You look like you saw a ghost." But Marcus wasn't seeing a ghost. Through the partially open door of room 314, he caught a glimpse of dark skin, glistening with perspiration. Natural hair pulled back in a loose bun, and those expressive brown eyes he'd spent countless nights getting lost in. Eyes that were currently squeezed shut in what was unmistakably the grip of a contraction. Simone Davis, his ex-girlfriend, the woman who'd walked out of his life 8 months ago with nothing but a terse text message and a forwarding address he'd never used. Simone Davis was having a baby. "Sir!" The nurse's voice snapped him back to reality. "Your daughter's going to need a few stitches, but it's not as bad as it looks. Head trauma, bleeds a lot, but that's her knee," Marcus corrected automatically, his voice sounding strange and distant to his own ears. "Right, knee trauma. Same principle applies." The nurse stood, brushing off her scrubs. "Let's get you both downstairs." But Marcus couldn't move. His feet felt rooted to the spot as another moan drifted from room 314, followed by a voice he recognized saying, "I can't do this. I can't do this alone." Alone. The word hit him like a physical blow. He found himself taking a step toward the room, then another, until he was standing in the doorway like some kind of creepy stalker. Jada, still in his arms, peered around his shoulder with the boundless curiosity of childhood. Simone's eyes fluttered open between contractions, and when her gaze met his, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. For a moment, neither of them moved. Neither of them breathed. The only sounds were the steady beep of monitors and Jada's whispered, "Daddy, why is that lady making those sounds?" "Marcus!" Simone's voice cracked on his name, and he saw something flicker across her face. Surprise, fear, maybe relief. "What are you? How did you—" "I was bringing Jada to the ER," he said lamely, as if that explained his presence in the maternity ward, as if that explained why he was staring at her like she'd risen from the dead. Another contraction hit, and Simone's back arched as she gripped the bed rails. A nurse bustled into the room, took one look at Marcus standing in the doorway, and made an assumption that would change everything. "Are you the father?" she asked briskly, checking the monitors. "We've been trying to reach someone for hours. She's been doing this all by herself, poor thing." Marcus opened his mouth to correct her, to explain that he was just a random ex-boyfriend who'd stumbled into the wrong ward, but Simone's eyes met his again. In them, he saw exhaustion, pain, and something else, something that looked almost like hope. He began, then stopped. Math wasn't his strongest subject outside of computer programming, but 8 months since their breakup, 9 months of pregnancy, the numbers aligned with sickening clarity. "Daddy," Jada whispered urgently in his ear, "I think that lady needs help." And as another contraction racked Simone's body, as she reached out instinctively and her fingers somehow found his free hand, Marcus realized that his daughter, brilliant, observant 7-year-old Jada, was absolutely right. The lady needed help, and for the first time in 8 months, Marcus didn't run away. The next few minutes blurred together like a glitched video file. Marcus found himself juggling Jada on one hip while somehow becoming an integral part of Simone's birthing team, a role he was spectacularly unqualified for and had never auditioned for. "Breathe with me," the nurse, whose name tag read Raymond, coached Simone through another contraction. He was a tall, lean man with kind eyes and an unexpected gentleness that contrasted with his booming voice. "And you," he pointed at Marcus without looking away from his patient, "put that baby down and wash your hands. Now." "She's not a baby. She's 7, Jada protested indignantly from Marcus's arms, but she allowed herself to be transferred to a nearby chair. And she's bleeding," she added, pointing to her knee with the matter-of-fact tone that children use to discuss everything from scraped knees to existential crises. Raymond's head swiveled toward them, taking in Jada's injury with professional efficiency. "Honey, that needs attention, but it's not life-threatening. Your mama here," he gestured toward Simone, "is having a baby right now. Priorities." "She's not my mama," Jada said, tilting her head with curiosity rather than correction. "My mama lives in Portland with her new husband, but Daddy looks like he's gonna throw up." She wasn't wrong. Marcus felt like his internal processor was overheating, trying to run too many programs simultaneously. Simone is having a baby. The baby might be mine. Jada needs stitches. I'm in a hospital wearing one shoe. This is not happening. Marcus. Simone's voice cut through his mental chaos, and he found himself moving toward the bed without conscious decision. Her hand reached for his, and he was startled by how natural it felt to intertwine their fingers. "I need to tell you—" Another contraction hit, stronger this time, and her words dissolved into a sharp intake of breath. Marcus squeezed her hand, remembering suddenly how she used to grip his fingers during scary movies, how she'd laugh at herself afterward for being such a baby about jump scares. "Save the conversation for after we meet this little one," Raymond said, checking the monitors with practiced ease. "But baby daddy or not, you're here now, so you might as well be useful. Talk to her. Keep her focused." "I don't know what to say," Marcus admitted, his programmer's brain struggling with a situation that couldn't be solved with logical algorithms. "Start with the truth," Simone gasped between breaths. That's always been your problem, hasn't it?" The words stung because they were accurate. Marcus had always been better with code than emotions, more comfortable debugging systems than addressing feelings. During their relationship, he'd shown love through actions, fixing her laptop, building her bookshelves, staying up all night to help her grade papers. But he'd rarely said the words she needed to hear. "The truth," he repeated, looking into her eyes. "Okay, the truth is, I've thought about you every day for 8 months. The truth is, I kept your coffee mug on my kitchen counter because throwing it away felt too final. The truth is, I'm terrified that I'm about to become a father again, and I still don't know if I'm any good at it the first time around." "You're good at it," Jada chimed in from her chair, swinging her legs. "You make the best pancakes, and you always read the voices different for each character. Plus, you let me stay up late when I have bad dreams." "Thanks, kiddo," Marcus said, his throat tight with unexpected emotion. "And the truth is," Simone said, her voice stronger now, "I should have told you. I should have called. I should have—" She broke off as another wave hit. "How far apart are the contractions?" Raymond asked, bustling around the room with the efficient energy of someone who'd done this dance 1,000 times. "About 3 minutes," Marcus answered, surprising himself. Apparently, his brain had been tracking patterns even in the midst of emotional chaos. "And, well, look at that. Dad's already thinking like a parent," Raymond grinned. "And speaking of parenting, sweetheart," he addressed Jada, "we need to get that knee looked at. Can't have you bleeding all over my nice clean maternity ward." "Can I stay until the baby comes?" Jada asked, her eyes bright with interest. "I've never seen a baby being born. Is it gross?" Daddy made it sound really gross when he explained where babies come from. "It's not gross," Simone managed between contractions, actually smiling for the first time since Marcus had stumbled into the room. It's like the most important thing your body will ever do. Like when Daddy fixed Mrs. Chen's computer and she cried because all her family photos were on there." "Exactly like that," Simone said, and Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a recognition, maybe, of how his daughter had just perfectly captured the weight of bringing life into the world. Raymond returned with supplies to clean and bandage Jada's knee. "Now, little miss, you can stay until we get this baby safely here, but then you and your daddy are going downstairs to get those stitches." "Deal! Deal!" Jada said solemnly, as if she were negotiating a business contract. Marcus caught Simone's eye over their daughter's head. Their daughter, he realized with a start, because that's what Jada was becoming in this moment. Part of a family configuration he'd never imagined. "We're really doing this?" he asked quietly. "We're really doing this," Simone confirmed, and squeezed his hand as the next contraction began. Outside, Denver continued its daily routine, unaware that in room 314 a family was being born in the most unexpected way possible. Time moved differently in room 314. Minutes stretched like taffy while hours compressed into heartbeats. Marcus had lost all sense of the outside world. There was only Simone's hand in his, Jada's quiet chatter from her corner chair, and Raymond's steady stream of encouragement, punctuated by medical jargon that sounded like a foreign language. "Talk to me about something else," Simone panted between contractions, her dark eyes finding Marcus's. "Anything else? Tell me about work. Tell me about your latest obsession with whatever programming language you discovered this week." Marcus almost smiled despite the circumstances. She remembered. During their relationship, she'd teased him mercilessly about his tendency to dive headfirst into new coding challenges, emerging days later with bloodshot eyes and breakthrough solutions. "Python," he said, settling into the familiar rhythm of technical explanation. "I've been working on this machine learning project that can predict—" He stopped abruptly as another contraction seized Simone's body. Her grip on his hand tightened until he was sure she'd leave permanent impressions. "Keep talking," she gritted out. "It helps. It predicts weather patterns for agricultural planning. Boring stuff, really. But the algorithm is elegant. And when I finally got the neural network to—" "Daddy," Jada interrupted from her chair, where Raymond had successfully cleaned and bandaged her knee with cartoon band-aids. "You're using your excited voice, the same one you use when you explain why Star Trek is better than Star Wars." "Star Trek is better than Star Wars," Marcus said automatically, earning a weak laugh from Simone. "See? There it is again," Jada giggled. "Miss Simone, did you know my daddy can speak computer language? Sometimes I catch him talking to his laptop like it's a person." "I don't talk to it," Marcus protested. "I talk at it. There's a difference." "Barely," Simone managed, and for a moment the tension in the room lightened. This was familiar territory, the gentle mockery, the comfortable teasing that had been the foundation of their relationship. Raymond checked the monitors again, his expression growing more focused. "How are we feeling, Mama? Scale of 1 to 10. 11, Simone gasped. "Maybe 12. That's what I like to hear," Raymond said, with professional cheer. "What means we're getting close. Dr. Martinez should be here any minute." As if summoned by his words, a woman in scrubs appeared in the doorway, mid-40s, competent energy radiating from her like heat from a CPU under full load. "Sorry I'm late," she said, already washing her hands. "Traffic was murder, and I had another delivery that took longer than expected. How are we doing?" The next few minutes blurred into medical efficiency. "Doctor." Martinez examined Simone with quick, gentle movements, while firing questions at Raymond in rapid succession. Marcus found himself pushed slightly aside but not dismissed, still holding Simone's hand, still feeling essential to the process. "Well, the good news is we're almost there," Dr. Martinez announced. The less good news is this baby seems to have inherited someone's stubborn streak." "That would be mine," Simone and Marcus said simultaneously, then looked at each other in surprise. "Both parents stubborn," Raymond noted with amusement. "This child doesn't stand a chance of being easygoing. Both parents." The phrase hung in the air like a program waiting to execute. Marcus felt Jada's eyes on him from across the room, her 7-year-old brain clearly processing the implications faster than his 34-year-old one. "Daddy," she said carefully, "if the baby is your baby too, does that make it my brother or sister?" The question hit the room like a system crash. Simone's eyes found Marcus's, and in them he saw 8 months of carrying this secret, 8 months of making this decision alone, 8 months of protecting him from a responsibility she wasn't sure he could handle. Marcus started, then stopped. "How did you explain to a child that adults sometimes made complicated choices, that love didn't always equal readiness, that her father had a history of running when things got too real?" "Yes," Simone said quietly, her voice steady despite the pain. "If your daddy wants it to be." The weight of choice settled on Marcus's shoulders like a heavy backpack. Not the choice of biology that had been made 9 months ago in a moment of passion and imperfect birth control. The choice of showing up, of staying, of being the father this child deserved instead of the father he'd had, absent, unreliable, gone. "Did I want it to be?" he heard himself say, and meant it with a certainty that surprised him. "I want to be here." "Even when it gets hard?" Simone asked, and he could hear years of disappointment in the question. "Even when you get scared? Even when I drive you crazy with my need to talk everything to death?" "Especially then," Marcus said, and leaned down to press his forehead against hers. "I'm done running, Simone. I'm done being my father." Another contraction hit, stronger than before, and Simone's back arched off the bed. "Oh God, oh God. This is it," Dr. Martinez announced, moving into position. "Time to meet your baby." And as chaos erupted around them, medical commands, encouragement, the primal sounds of birth, Marcus held tight to Simone's hand and felt his life reorganizing itself around this moment, this choice, this family he was finally brave enough to claim. The next 20 minutes redefined Marcus's understanding of chaos theory. He'd thought debugging a crashed server at 3 a.m. was stressful, but that was nothing compared to the organized pandemonium of a delivery room in full swing. "Push! Simone! Big push now!" Dr. Martinez commanded, her voice cutting through the controlled chaos with surgical precision. Marcus felt like his hand might break under Simone's grip, but he wouldn't have moved for anything. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he watched the woman he'd never stopped loving fight the hardest battle of her life. Every instinct screamed at him to fix this somehow, to write code that would make it easier, to solve the problem with logic and algorithms. But there was no debugging birth. There was only showing up. "I can't," Simone gasped, her head falling back against the pillow. "I can't do this anymore. I'm too tired." "Yes, you can," Marcus said, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. "You're the strongest person I know. Remember when you defended that kid in your class whose parents couldn't afford school supplies? You took on the entire school board." "That was different," she panted. "No, it wasn't. You never back down when something matters. And this," he gestured toward her belly, "this matters more than anything." From her corner chair, Jada piped up with the fearless wisdom of childhood. "Miss Simone, you're like Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman never gives up." Raymond, who had been monitoring everything with the steady calm of someone who'd witnessed this miracle countless times, grinned broadly. "Listen to the little girl. She knows what she's talking about. Wonder Woman's got nothing on a mama bringing her baby into the world." "Easy for you to say," Simone muttered, but Marcus caught the tiny smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "Another contraction coming," Dr. Martinez announced. "This is the big one, Simone. I can see the head. Your baby's almost here." The next few moments happened in slow motion and light speed simultaneously. Simone bore down with everything she had, her face a mask of concentration and determination. Marcus found himself holding his breath, as if his lungs had forgotten their primary function. "That's it. That's it," Dr. Martinez encouraged. "Heads out. One more push for the shoulders." And then, in a rush of fluid and motion that Marcus's brain would spend weeks trying to process, their son entered the world with a lusty cry that filled room 314 like the most beautiful sound ever programmed. "Oh my God," Marcus breathed, staring at the tiny, wrinkled, perfect human being in Dr. Martinez's capable hands. "Oh my God, Simone, look at him." But Simone was already looking, tears streaming down her face as she reached for their son. "Is he okay? Is he healthy?" 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a set of lungs that would make an opera singer jealous, Dr. Martinez announced, placing the baby on Simone's chest. "Congratulations, you two. You have a beautiful boy." Marcus stared at his son, and felt something fundamental shift in his chest, like someone had just rewritten his core programming. The baby was impossibly small, impossibly perfect, with a shock of dark hair and skin that would likely settle somewhere between his pale complexion and Simone's rich brown. "He's so little," Jada whispered, having crept closer to the bed despite Raymond's earlier instructions to stay put. "Can I touch him?" "Gently," Simone said, guiding Jada's small hand to rest on the baby's back. "Meet your little brother." Brother. The word settled into Marcus's consciousness like a missing piece of code finally clicking into place. He was looking at his family, not the family he'd planned or expected, but the family that had somehow assembled itself in the most unlikely circumstances. "What's his name?" Raymond asked, efficiently cleaning up while keeping one eye on the new family tableau. Marcus and Simone looked at each other, and he realized they'd never discussed names. 8 months of pregnancy, and this conversation had never happened. "Noah," Simone said softly. "I was thinking Noah, like starting over after the flood." "Noah," Marcus repeated, testing the weight of the name. "Noah Green Davis, or Davis Green," Simone countered, and despite everything, the exhaustion, the shock, the complete upheaval of his orderly life, Marcus laughed. "Still negotiating," he said, and leaned down to kiss her forehead. "Some things never change. Some things do," she replied, looking meaningfully at their son, then at Jada, who was now singing a soft lullaby she'd learned in school. "Doctor." Martinez finished her post-delivery procedures with practiced efficiency. "I'll give you folks some time to get acquainted," she said, stripping off her gloves. "But, Dad, you should probably get that little girl down to emergency for those stitches soon." "Can't we stay a little longer?" Jada pleaded. "I want to make sure baby Noah knows I'm his big sister." Marcus looked at his daughter, his fearless, wise, wonderful daughter, and then at Simone holding their newborn son, and felt the last piece of his resistance crumble. 15 more minutes, he said. "Then we take care of that knee." 20, Jada negotiated. "Deal," Marcus said, and settled into the chair beside Simone's bed to watch his son sleep. Outside, Denver hummed with late afternoon traffic, but in room 314, time moved to the rhythm of a newborn's breathing and the quiet murmur of a family learning how to be. 2 hours later, the honeymoon phase of new parenthood crashed into the unforgiving wall of reality. Marcus sat in the emergency room waiting area, bouncing a fussy Noah while Jada finally got her stitches. The sweet, sleepy baby from upstairs had transformed into a red-faced, screaming, tiny human who seemed personally offended by the existence of everything. "He's probably hungry," suggested the elderly woman sitting across from them, her voice barely audible over Noah's protests. "Simone's trying to rest," Marcus said, shifting Noah to his other arm in a futile attempt to find a position that might calm him. "The nurse said she needs to recover from the delivery." What he didn't say was that Simone had fallen asleep mid-sentence while they were discussing logistics, exhaustion hitting her like a system shutdown. What he also didn't say was that he had no idea what he was doing, and Noah seemed to sense his incompetence with the supernatural intuition that babies apparently possessed. "First time?" the woman asked kindly. "Second," Marcus corrected, then paused. "Actually, I don't know. It's complicated." Complicated didn't begin to cover it. With Jada, he'd been present for the aftermath, divorced parents, shared custody, weekend visits that gradually became his primary responsibility when his ex-wife decided Portland offered better opportunities than Denver. He'd learned fatherhood through trial and error, not through 3 a.m. feedings and diaper changes. His phone buzzed with a text from work. "Server's down. Can you remote in?" Marcus stared at the message, then at his screaming son, then at the emergency room where his daughter was getting stitched up because he'd been too distracted by coding to properly supervise her playground time. The weight of trying to be everything to everyone pressed down on his shoulders like a badly designed load-balancing system. "Daddy!" Jada's voice cut through Noah's cries as she emerged from the treatment room, her knee now properly bandaged and her face bright with pride. "Look, the doctor said I was the bravest patient she had all day." "That's my girl," Marcus said, managing a smile despite his frayed nerves. "How does it feel?" "Like a robot leg," Jada announced, testing her range of motion. "But a cool robot leg. Can I hold Noah now?" Marcus hesitated. Noah was still crying, and Jada was just 7, and what if she dropped him, and what if— "I'll be super careful," Jada promised, settling into the plastic chair beside him. "I've been watching YouTube videos about how to hold babies." Against his better judgment, or maybe because his judgment had completely short-circuited, Marcus carefully transferred Noah to Jada's arms, positioning pillows around her for support. Miraculously, Noah's cries subsided to confused whimpers. "See?" Jada said with the smug satisfaction of someone who'd just solved a complex problem. "Babies like other kids, better than grown-ups sometimes. We're closer to their size." Marcus's phone buzzed again. Work. Then again. Then again. "You should answer it," Jada said, not looking up from Noah's face. "I've got him. I can't just— Daddy." Jada's voice carried the patient tone of someone far older than her years. "I know how to hold a baby. And you're doing that thing where you look like your brain is gonna explode." She wasn't wrong. Marcus felt like his internal processing was overloading, trying to run too many programs simultaneously. How did single parents do this? How did anyone do this? His phone rang, and this time it wasn't a text, it was his boss. "I have to take this," he told Jada, who waved him away with the confidence of someone who clearly had everything under control. "Marcus, thank God." His boss's voice crackled through the speaker. "The entire client system is down. We need you to—" "I can't," Marcus said, the words feeling foreign in his mouth. In 5 years at the company, he'd never said no to an emergency call. "I'm at the hospital. My daughter needed stitches, and the baby was just born." "And baby?" His boss's voice shifted from urgent to confused. "What baby? You didn't mention—" "It's complicated," Marcus said again, because apparently that was his default explanation for everything now. "Can Rodriguez handle it? Or Chen?" There was a pause. the kind of silence that usually preceded conversations about commitment and priorities. Rodriguez is in Seattle, and Chen's already pulling a double. Marcus, I need to know, is this going to be a problem? Because if your personal life is going to interfere with my personal life, Marcus said slowly, watching Jada gently rock Noah while humming the same lullaby she'd sung in the delivery room, just got a lot more complicated. But no, it won't be a problem. I'll remote in tonight after everyone's settled. Another pause. Okay, but Marcus, figure this out. We can't have... Marcus hung up, suddenly feeling like he was standing at a crossroads in his life's source code. One path led back to the familiar territory of work first, everything else later. The other led into uncharted territory where babies cried at inconvenient times, and 7-year-olds gave parenting advice, and ex-girlfriends needed support during the hardest thing they'd ever done. Is everything okay? Jada asked, looking up from Noah with concerned eyes. Yeah, kiddo, Marcus said, making his choice. Everything's going to be fine. His phone buzzed with another urgent message, but this time he didn't even look at it. Instead, he sat down beside his daughter and his son and tried to figure out how to be the father they both deserved. The next morning brought a peculiar kind of chaos that Marcus was beginning to recognize as his new normal. He stood in Simone's hospital room, holding Noah while trying to process the discharge paperwork. When it hit him, they had nowhere to go together. So, Simone said carefully, adjusting her position in the bed with obvious discomfort, I guess we need to talk logistics. Marcus looked up from the forms, insurance information, follow-up appointments, a bewildering array of medical instructions that made debugging look simple. Logistics? Like where everyone sleeps tonight, Jada supplied helpfully from her perch by the window, where she'd been providing running commentary on the parking lot drama below. Miss Simone can't go back to her apartment yet, right? Because she just had surgery in her belly. It wasn't exactly surgery, kiddo, Marcus said, though he wasn't entirely sure about the medical specifics. But you're right. The doctor said she shouldn't be climbing stairs for a few days. Simone's apartment was a third-floor walk-up in Capitol Hill, artfully decorated but utterly impractical for someone recovering from childbirth. Marcus's house, on the other hand, was a single-story ranch in Lakewood, with a guest room that currently served as his home office and storage space for Jada's outgrown toys. I could stay with my sister in Aurora, Simone offered, but her tone suggested it wasn't her preferred option. Lindsay's got that pull-out couch, and she's been wanting to meet Noah. The sister who told you that dating a white guy was interesting life choice number 47? Marcus asked, remembering their few awkward encounters. She's evolved, Simone said dryly. Besides, she was right about the interesting part. Raymond appeared in the doorway with a wheelchair and his trademark grin. Y'all still figuring out the sleeping arrangements? Because Mama here needs to get moving. We've got 3 more deliveries coming in today, and I need this room. She can stay with us, Jada announced with the decisive tone of someone who'd clearly been thinking this through. We have a guest room, and Daddy can move all his computer stuff to the garage. Plus, I can help with baby Noah. Marcus felt the familiar panic of his ordered world being reorganized without his input. His home office was his sanctuary, carefully arranged with dual monitors, ergonomic everything, and a noise-cancelling setup that allowed him to work uninterrupted. Moving it to the garage would mean... That's very thoughtful of you, Jada, Simone said gently, but your daddy and I need to discuss... It's fine, Marcus heard himself say, surprising everyone, including himself. I mean, if you want to, it makes sense. Medically speaking, the truth was, the thought of Simone going to her sister's apartment, where he wouldn't be able to help with Noah, where he'd be relegated to awkward visiting schedules and formal arrangements, made his chest tight with something that felt like loss. Are you sure? Simone asked, studying his face with the intensity she'd once reserved for grading particularly difficult essays. Because we're talking about a newborn, Marcus. They cry a lot. At all hours, and I'm going to be emotional and probably impossible to live with for the first few weeks. More impossible than when you had finals week stress? Marcus asked, earning a reluctant smile. Significantly more impossible. Raymond cleared his throat. Not to interrupt this domestic negotiation, but we really do need to get moving. Hospital policy and all that. The next hour passed in a blur of car seat installation, during which Marcus discovered that infant car seats were apparently designed by people who'd never actually tried to install infant car seats, and the slow, careful journey to his house. Simone dozed in the passenger seat while Noah slept in his carrier, and Jada provided a steady stream of chatter about how they should reorganize the guest room to be more baby-friendly. "We need a nightlight," she explained as Marcus pulled into his driveway, "and maybe some of those plug things, so baby Noah doesn't stick his fingers in the outlets when he gets bigger. Oh, and we should move the bookshelf because babies like to pull books down and make messes." "He's not exactly mobile yet, kiddo," Marcus said, but he was already mentally cataloguing the baby-proofing that would need to happen. When had his brain started thinking in terms of safety hazards and child-friendly spaces? Getting Simone and Noah settled in the guest room required more coordination than deploying a major software update. Marcus found himself moving between practical tasks, clearing his computer equipment, making sure Simone had everything she needed, and the surreal reality that his ex-girlfriend and newborn son were now living in his house. "This is weird, isn't it?" Simone said as he set a water glass on the nightstand. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, Noah sleeping in her arms, looking simultaneously exhausted and beautiful in the afternoon light filtering through the windows. "Weird doesn't begin to cover it," Marcus admitted, settling into the chair he'd moved from his office. "But good weird, maybe." "Definitely good weird," Jada announced from the doorway. "Like when you finally get a puzzle piece to fit, even though it looked like it wouldn't work." Marcus looked at his daughter, then at Simone and Noah, and realized that Jada had, once again, perfectly captured something he couldn't have articulated himself. They were all puzzle pieces that shouldn't have fit together, but somehow did. At 2:47 a.m., Marcus discovered that newborns operated on a schedule designed by someone with a particularly cruel sense of humor. Noah's cries pierced through the house like a smoke alarm, jolting Marcus from the first deep sleep he'd managed in what felt like weeks. He stumbled through the dark hallway, guided by muscle memory and the faint nightlight Jada had insisted they install. The guest room door was ajar, and he could hear Simone's exhausted voice trying to soothe their son. "Hey," he whispered, peering around the doorframe. "Everything okay?" Simone looked up from the rocking chair, another of Jada's suggestions, borrowed from a neighbor, and Marcus could see the exhaustion etched in every line of her face. "He won't stop crying. I've fed him, changed him, burped him. I don't know what else to do." Marcus stepped into the room, noting the scattered evidence of new parent chaos, burp cloths draped over every surface, a half-empty water bottle, the breast pump kit that had arrived that afternoon via same-day delivery, because apparently babies needed things that weren't in any normal household. "Here, let me try," he said, reaching for Noah. "Sometimes they just need a change of scenery." The moment Noah settled into Marcus's arms, his cries subsided to confused whimpers. Marcus began the gentle bounce and sway motion he'd learned with Jada, moving in a slow circle around the room. "How do you do that?" Simone asked, slumping back in the chair with obvious relief. "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "Maybe he likes the change in elevation. Different rhythm. Could be he just needed to complain to someone new." "Like customer service," Simone said with a tired laugh. "Transfer to another department when the first one can't help." They stood there in comfortable semi-darkness, Noah gradually settling into sleep against Marcus's chest. The house was quiet, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of settling wood. It felt domestic, in a way that made Marcus's chest tight with unexpected emotion. "This is harder than I remembered," Simone said quietly. "I keep thinking I should know what I'm doing, but every time I think I've figured something out, he changes the rules." "You're doing great," Marcus said, meaning it. "Better than great. You literally grew a person and then brought him into the world. Everything else is just troubleshooting. Troubleshooting, she repeated. I leave it to you to make parenting sound like a technical problem. Isn't it, though? Input, crying baby, desired output, sleeping baby. We just have to debug the process until we find what works. Simone was quiet for a long moment, watching him gently rock Noah back to sleep. I was so scared you'd run, she said finally. When I found out I was pregnant, you have this way of disappearing when things get too real. The words stung because they were true. Marcus had always been better at solving problems than staying for the complicated aftermath. I almost did, he admitted. In the hospital, there was this moment when I could have just said, wrong room, not my baby, and walked away. What stopped you? Marcus considered the question, still swaying gently with Noah. Jada, partly, the way she just accepted him as her brother without question. But mostly, he paused, trying to find words for something he was still figuring out himself. Mostly I realized I was tired of being the guy who runs. I want to be the guy who stays. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. A soft sound from the doorway made them both turn. Jada stood there in her dinosaur pajamas, hair sticking up at impossible angles. Is baby Noah okay? She whispered. I heard crying. He's fine now, Marcus said. What are you doing up, kiddo? Bad dream, Jada said, then added with characteristic honesty, also, I wanted to make sure everyone was still here. The simple statement hit Marcus like a punch to the chest. Of course Jada was worried about people leaving. Her mother had moved across the country. Her father had a history of emotional unavailability. And now, suddenly, there were new people in their house, new family members who might disappear as quickly as they'd appeared. We're all here, Simone said gently. Your dad and I are just taking turns helping with Noah. Like a team, Jada asked hopefully. Like a team, Marcus confirmed, meeting Simone's eyes over their daughter's head. The word carried weight, partnership, commitment, the promise of shared responsibility. Can I help too? Jada asked. I'm good at singing lullabies, and I know all the best YouTube videos about babies. Tomorrow, Simone promised. Right now, everyone should try to get some sleep. As they settled Noah back into his bassinet and Jada returned to her room, Marcus felt something shift in the air between him and Simone. Not romance, they were both too exhausted and overwhelmed for that, but something deeper. Understanding, maybe. The recognition that they were building something together, one sleepless night at a time. Thank you, Simone said as Marcus headed toward the door. For what? For staying. For not running. For being here at 2:47 a.m. even though you don't have to be. I do have to be, Marcus said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. This is where I belong. And for the first time in his adult life, he meant it completely. 3 days into their unconventional living arrangement, Marcus learned that newborns were remarkably similar to unstable code. Just when you thought you'd figured out the pattern, everything crashed spectacularly. I don't understand, he said, staring at Noah's latest diaper explosion with the bewildered expression of someone whose algorithms had just been proven fundamentally flawed. I followed the same exact process as yesterday. Same angle, same technique, same... Welcome to babies. Simone laughed from the bed, where she was attempting to pump while simultaneously grading papers her principal had dropped off. They're not computers, Marcus. They don't respond to consistent inputs with predictable outputs. But that's... Marcus paused, Noah squirming on the changing table while yellow evidence of his digestive success decorated what had been a clean onesie. That's completely illogical. Exactly, Jada chimed in from her spot on the floor where she was building an elaborate block city. That's why babies are more fun than your computer programs. They're surprising. Marcus grabbed another diaper, trying to ignore the fact that he'd somehow gotten baby poop on his elbow. In the past 72 hours, he'd learned more about infant bodily functions than he'd ever wanted to know. And yet, somehow, each diaper change still felt like navigating uncharted territory. His phone rang from the dresser. Work again. It had been ringing constantly since Monday, each call a reminder of the deadlines he was missing, the meetings he'd rescheduled, the projects slowly accumulating like digital dust. "Answer it," Simone said without looking up from her papers. "I know you're stressed about work." "I'm not," Marcus began, then stopped. He was stressed about work. He was also stressed about Noah's feeding schedule, worried about Simone's recovery, concerned about Jada's adjustment, and completely overwhelmed by the logistics of suddenly managing a household of 4. "It can wait." "Marcus!" Simone's voice carried the patient tone of someone who'd spent years trying to get through to stubborn students. "Your phone has been buzzing for 3 days straight. Answer the call." He secured Noah's fresh diaper, successfully this time, and picked up his phone. "Rodriguez, what's the emergency now?" "Marcus, thank God. The Johnson account is threatening to pull out if we don't have the security patch deployed by Friday. I've been trying to reach you." I know. Look, can you send me the code repository? I'll review it tonight." And Noah chose that moment to let out a wail that could probably be heard in neighboring states. Through the phone, Marcus heard Rodriguez pause. "Is that a baby?" "Yes, your baby. It's complicated." "Jesus, Marcus, how complicated are we talking? Because if you're having some kind of personal crisis, maybe you should take some time off. Get your head straight." The casual dismissal in Rodriguez's voice, the assumption that family was a distraction rather than a priority, hit Marcus like poorly written code encountering an unexpected error. For years, he'd operated under the same logic: work first, everything else after. But watching Simone struggle to balance grading and recovery, seeing Jada adapt to her new role as big sister, holding Noah during his 3 a.m. crying sessions, none of that felt like a distraction. It felt like the most important debugging he'd ever done. "I'll have the patch reviewed by tomorrow," Marcus said evenly. "But Rodriguez, don't call again unless the servers are literally on fire." He hung up before Rodriguez could respond, then looked up to find 3 pairs of eyes watching him with varying degrees of surprise. "Daddy said a bad word," Jada observed with scientific interest. "Which one?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious. "Literally, Mrs. Henderson says we shouldn't use literally unless we really mean literally." "Mrs. Henderson is right," Simone said, but she was smiling. "Also, that was the most assertive I've ever heard you be with your co-workers." Marcus lifted Noah, settling him against his shoulder for the post-diaper change burping ritual. "Yeah, well, priorities change." "Speaking of priorities," Simone said carefully, "we should probably talk about this." She gestured around the room, encompassing the organized chaos of their shared space. "How long this arrangement is supposed to last?" The question Marcus had been avoiding settled between them like an uninvited guest. They'd been operating in crisis mode, dealing with immediate needs, without discussing the bigger picture. But Simone was recovering well, Noah was healthy, and the emergency that had brought them together was gradually resolving into the question of what came next. "I don't know," Marcus admitted, patting Noah's back with the gentle rhythm he'd perfected over the past few days. "I mean, medically, you could probably go home this weekend. But I like this," he said, surprising himself with the honesty. "I like being part of Noah's bedtime routine. I like Jada having someone to help with homework when I'm stuck on a work call. I like having you here to talk through the stuff that doesn't make sense." "Like babies being illogical?" Simone asked, her voice soft. "Like everything being illogical," Marcus corrected. "Work, parenting, this thing between us that I still don't know how to define." Jada looked up from her blocks, having apparently been listening to more of the conversation than he'd realized. "Can't you just see what happens? Like a science experiment." "A science experiment?" Simone asked. "Yeah, like maybe Miss Simone and baby Noah stay here for a while longer, and we all figure out how to be a family together. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, at least we tried." Marcus stared at his 7-year-old daughter, wondering when she'd become the wisest person in the house. "What do you think?" he asked Simone. "Want to be part of Jada's family experiment?" Simone's smile was tentative but real. "I think I'd like that very much." Noah chose that moment to burp with impressive volume, as if adding his vote to the family meeting. "Motion carried," Marcus said, and kissed the top of his son's head. 2 weeks into their family experiment, the universe decided to stress test their new arrangement with the efficiency of a particularly vindictive quality assurance engineer. It started when Jada woke up with a fever of 102, and the kind of pathetic cough that made Marcus want to wrap her in bubble wrap for the rest of her life. Then Noah decided to have his first real colicky episode, crying inconsolably for 4 hours straight, while Simone fought through her own exhaustion to comfort him. And just as Marcus was trying to juggle sick daughter duty with fussy baby support, his boss called with news that the Johnson account was threatening to sue over the delayed security patch. "I can't do this," Marcus said, standing in his kitchen at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday, still in yesterday's t-shirt, holding a thermometer in one hand and his phone in the other, while Noah's cries echoed from the living room. "And I literally cannot do this." "Yes, you can," Simone said from the couch, where she was doing the rhythmic bounce and sway dance that sometimes helped with Noah's colic. She looked as exhausted as Marcus felt, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, still wearing the milk-stained shirt she'd fallen asleep in. "We can do this." "How?" Marcus asked, feeling his carefully constructed problem-solving abilities crumble like poorly written code. "Jada needs to go to the doctor. Noah won't stop crying, work is imploding, and I haven't slept more than 2 hours in a row since Sunday." "Daddy?" Jada's voice drifted weakly from her bedroom. "I think I'm gonna throw up." Marcus closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and felt something snap into place, not breaking but aligning, like a program finally finding its proper execution path. "Okay," he said, more to himself than to Simone. "Priorities. Jada first, then Noah, then work can wait." "Work can't wait," Simone protested. "You heard your boss." "Work can always wait," Marcus said with a certainty that surprised him. "Sick kids can't." He spent the next hour in full crisis management mode, calling Jada's pediatrician while simultaneously researching colic remedies on his phone and sending increasingly firm emails to his co-workers about realistic timelines. When Dr. Peterson confirmed it was just a routine virus and recommended rest and fluids, Marcus felt his stress level drop from critical to merely overwhelming. "How did you do that?" Simone asked as they finally got both kids settled, Jada napping with her favorite stuffed dinosaur, Noah exhausted into temporary quiet in his bassinet. "Do what? Stay calm, make decisions, handle everything without falling apart." Marcus considered the question, settling onto the couch beside her with the careful movements of someone whose entire body ached with exhaustion. "I guess I just realized that panicking wasn't going to solve anything, and that maybe being a parent isn't about having all the answers, it's about figuring them out as you go." Very philosophical for someone running on 2 hours of sleep. "Sleep deprivation makes me wise," apparently. They sat in blessed silence for a few minutes, listening to the house breathe around them. Outside, Denver continued its daily routine, unaware that Marcus's entire understanding of himself had shifted sometime between taking Jada's temperature and telling his boss that family emergencies took precedence over client demands. "I was wrong about you," Simone said quietly. "Wrong how?" "I thought you'd run the first time things got really hard, when the newborn phase stopped being cute and started being exhausting. When work pressure collided with family pressure and you had to choose." Marcus thought about the moment in the kitchen when he'd felt overwhelmed, when running had seemed like a viable option. The old Marcus, the one who'd let his ex-wife handle most of Jada's early childhood because work felt more manageable than emotions, might have done exactly that. "I thought I would too," he admitted. "For about 30 seconds this morning, I actually considered it. Just walking out the door and driving until I found somewhere quiet." "What stopped you?" "Jada calling for me, and the realization that running away wouldn't actually solve anything. It would just make everything worse for everyone else." Simone leaned against his shoulder, and Marcus felt the weight of her trust like a physical thing. So what happens now? Now I call Rodriguez back and tell him that the patch will be ready when it's ready, not when the client wants it. And then I order us some dinner because neither of us has eaten since breakfast. And then we see if we can get through another night without anyone ending up in the emergency room. Very romantic, Simone said with a tired laugh. I'm working up to romance, Marcus replied. Right now I'm just trying to master basic survival. His phone buzzed with another work call, but this time Marcus didn't even look at it. Instead, he reached for the takeout menus stacked on his coffee table and started planning dinner for his unconventional, chaotic, perfect family. Chinese or Thai? He asked. Surprise me, Simone said. I trust your judgment. And as Marcus scrolled through menu options while listening to his son sleep and his daughter's slightly congested breathing from the next room, he realized that trust was the most important code he'd ever been asked to write. 3 months later, Marcus stood in his backyard watching Jada teach 8-week-old Noah the fundamentals of dinosaur taxonomy. She held him carefully against her shoulder, his tiny head bobbing as she pointed to various toys scattered across the grass. See, baby Noah, that's a triceratops. They were herbivores, which means they only ate plants. And that one is a T-Rex, which would totally eat the triceratops if they lived at the same time, but they didn't. So it's okay. I'm not sure he's ready for paleontology lessons, Simone said, emerging from the house with 2 cups of coffee and that smile that still made Marcus's chest do complicated things. It's never too early to start, Jada replied, with the serious tone of someone who'd clearly given this considerable thought. Besides, he likes my voice. Look, he's not crying. She was right. Noah had developed what Marcus privately called his Jada preference, a state of unusual calm that seemed to occur only when his big sister was providing commentary on the world around them. Smart kid, Marcus said, accepting his coffee gratefully. He's already figured out that Jada has all the best information. They'd fallen into this routine over the past few weeks. Lazy Saturday mornings that stretched into afternoon, no urgent deadlines or crisis management, just the gentle chaos of family life. Marcus had negotiated a remote work arrangement that gave him flexibility. Simone had extended her maternity leave, and somehow they'd created space for something that felt remarkably like happiness. So, Simone said, settling beside him on the porch steps, I got a call from my landlord yesterday. Marcus felt his stomach drop, that familiar panic response to change, threatening to override his hard-won emotional stability. Yeah, my lease is up next month. He wants to know if I'm renewing. The question hung between them like a program waiting for input. They'd been living in a comfortable state of temporary permanence, acknowledging that their arrangement was working without defining what that meant long-term. What did you tell him? Marcus asked, proud of how steady his voice sounded. I told him I needed to talk to my family first. Family. The word still felt new in Marcus's mouth, like learning a programming language he'd never expected to need. But it fit, this collection of people who'd assembled themselves through accident and choice, crisis and commitment. Daddy, Jada called from the grass, when are you and Miss Simone going to get married? Jada! Marcus felt heat creep up his neck. We haven't... I'm just asking, Jada said, with the guileless directness of childhood, because baby Noah should probably have the same last name as everyone else, right? It's confusing for school forms. She's got a point about the paperwork, Simone said, and Marcus couldn't tell if she was teasing or testing the waters. Is that a proposal? He asked, attempting levity while his heart did something that felt distinctly like debugging under pressure. From a 7-year-old? I think I'll hold out for something more romantic. Marcus looked at his daughter, teaching his son about dinosaurs, at the woman who'd somehow become essential to his daily happiness, at the life they'd built through a combination of accident and intentional choice. 6 months ago, he'd been a single father focused primarily on code and weekend custody. Now he was part of something larger and more complex than any system he'd ever designed. Simone, he said, setting down his coffee and turning to face her properly. I know this all started completely backwards. Hospital emergency, surprise baby, forced cohabitation, not exactly the romance novel version. Definitely not, she agreed, but her eyes were soft. But I want you to know that this, he gestured toward their assembled family, isn't just convenience or crisis management anymore. It's choice. Every day, it's choice. Even when Noah has colic, she asked, especially when Noah has colic. Even when Jada decides to reorganize the kitchen cabinets according to her own mysterious logic. That only happened once, Jada protested, and my system was better. Even then, Marcus confirmed, reaching for Simone's hand. Even when work gets crazy, even when we're both exhausted, even when nothing goes according to plan. Because apparently I'm really bad at planning anyway. Terrible at planning, Simone agreed. Excellent at adapting. So what do you say? Want to make this official? Not necessarily marriage. We can figure out that timeline later. But staying, building something permanent, letting Jada teach Noah about dinosaurs until he's old enough to argue back. Simone was quiet for a moment, watching their children with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. Then she smiled, the real smile, the one that had first made him stumble over his own words 2 years ago. I already told my landlord I wasn't renewing, she said. I was just waiting to see if you'd ask. Really? Really? Though next time, I want flowers, and maybe a ring. Jada's right about the paperwork being confusing. Marcus pulled her closer, kissing her forehead as Noah's contented babbling mixed with Jada's patient explanations about herbivore digestive systems. I can definitely manage flowers, he said. The ring might take some research. You've got time, Simone said, settling against his shoulder. And we've got all the time in the world. And as Denver hummed around them, traffic and neighbors and the ordinary sounds of a Saturday afternoon, Marcus finally understood what code he'd been trying to write all along. It was love, complex, unpredictable, perfectly imperfect love. The end. Thanks for watching to the end. Did you like the story? Tell us what you thought in the comments below. We want to know what you think. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe now for more exciting stories you won't want to miss. Activate the bell to be notified whenever a new video comes out. See you in the next story. See you there.